This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and Upsnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, it's Reagan Archibald here with the Knee and Spinal Pain Summit. I've got a very special and important guest, Dr. Dan Kellams, with us today. Not only is he a dear friend of mine, close colleague, he's an inventor, he's a coach of coaches, so he's the doctor of doctors. He trains all of our practitioners at Go Wellness in functional medicine. And today he's going to be talking about, kind of some interesting ways that you can uncover the hormonal aspects of pain. So this conversation will be completely unique, and you will not want to miss this. So as I introduce Dan, you'll want to realize that he's founded Peak Vitality. He's a co-founder there in Denver, Colorado. He specializes in functional, holistic approaches to healthcare. He helps people all around the community, all around the country, I should say, not just in Denver, but he helps them with autoimmunity, infertility, pain issues, knee pain, joint pain. He's worked with NBA basketball players, celebrities. His belief is to help people live longer, healthier lives and to optimize hormonal levels and reproductive health. So Dan, welcome to the summit.
I'm happy to be here. That's a wonderful introduction. You're always so good at those. So yeah, super happy to be here.
Yeah, well, you're an easy doctor to introduce. I mean, one of my heroes right here. And so let's jump in, because there's some myths out there about pain, and you've seen those. We have patients that show up. And what are some of the big myths in the Denver area that you see people's ideas about pain? Maybe that, they're sissies if they're talking about pain, or it's all in their head. But what do you see in your practice?
Yeah, I think some of the stigmas around it. One is, first thing that comes up is you tough it out as long as you can, right? Right. And that's a bad strategy. That never works for anybody, because the pain is something's wrong, and the further we go down that path, the more it becomes wrong, and the harder it is to get it turned around. So I think the first thing that we see is like, you don't talk about it, you tough it out until you can't do anything else, which unfortunately we hear a lot from orthopedists. They tell people, take it as long as you can, and then come in and we'll replace it, right?
Yeah.
Depending on the type of pain, right?
Right. As soon as you can't tolerate it, we'll do the knee replacement.
Yeah. So I would say that was the first one. The second one is people assume that it just comes along with age, like it has to happen. And it's just a part of the aging process. Yeah. And we see these super centenarians, these people that are living over 100 years old, and they're out there, they're living their life. They're living their best. Some of them are living better lives in 90s and 100s than they did in their 40s and 50s, right? So, it is not, or doesn't have to be an inevitability, right?
Mm-hmm. So, because we've all been indoctrinated that, hey, joints are made to wear out.
Yeah.
And so eventually you're going to have to get these things replaced. You know how many patients have told me that? Well, I'm very active. I'm super active, Reagan. So eventually these things are going to wear out.
Yeah. And it's crazy that people have the thought process, and we can dig into that, why that's the case. And I think the other big one is, and you've probably, this is something that's going to be brought up throughout the summit, is that medication and surgery are the only options,
That's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, just last year alone, the opioid use went up 22%. And, that may numb the pain for a little while, but it's not a solution. And then surgery is the leading cause of surgery. So maybe that's not the best option either, right?
Yeah, right. And it's unfortunate, because it's, we laugh about it, and you almost have to. It's a very laughable situation. But in all seriousness, when, like you said, people are indoctrinated with these ideas from an early age. I heard this from my grandparents and my aunts and uncles, my mom and dad, and still, even with the results that we get, as astronomically helpful as our approaches have been, it's still getting them to let go of the idea that those three facts aren't true.
Yeah, man. And there's so many myths out there, misinformation. People can run really fast in the wrong direction. I know I've been in a car before and I think I'm heading to the right destination, only to realize my Google Maps took me to the wrong place and I got there really fast, but I showed up at the wrong place, which I think is what happens when people go to get their pain treated in conventional medicine.
Yeah, and I think it's a big deal for the summit because at least people are out there trying to get the education and understand, because one of my favorite quotes is, the further you run from the problem, the further away you get from the solution, right?
Wow.
So, and if you're moving in the wrong direction, you're getting further away from an appropriate solution, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about those. You're a hormone specialist. You've taught me more about endocrinology and functional medicine and hormones than anybody. And so how do hormones, how are they impacted by pain? And do they actually even matter? I guess I should ask when it comes to pain.
Yeah, and it's crazy because it's such an overlooked process, right? And one of the reasons, and this will ring true with everybody that's in here today and watching the summit, is that one of the things that we know for sure, that people, when they're younger, they heal better.
Yeah.
But we know people heal better when they're younger, one, because they have a rich source of their own stem cells, right?
Sure.
That's been a big word for the last few years, but their hormones are optimized. Thyroid's working, their growth hormones working, their blood sugar is stabilized. And these are all what we call tropic factors, things that build or heal, right? Anabolic hormones, they build and heal, and they're optimized when you're young. So it's like, that's probably one of the top factors, because without those hormones, those things, all those growth factors and stem cells and PRP, that stuff does not work if the hormones are not reasonably balanced or optimized, right? And when we're young, our hormones have not been really, really affected by our lifestyle at that point.
You know, what's crazy is in football, we used to do Hell Week. And so you'd practice 3 times a day. And I remember how sore I would be by the end of that week. And then I would just recover. And it was like, oh, I could do it. Now I think Hell Week would literally be like Hell Week, and Reagan would be in a stretcher, in day 2.
Yeah. And it's crazy how that affects you. And, one of the questions you said was, does the inflammation and the hormones matter? And how does pain and inflammation affect hormones? Well, what you can think about is pain is inflammation, right? And so you have that, we know there's an inflammatory process related to pain. And pain, and this is something we say in the office a lot, it's damaging and it's stressful. So when you have an increase in pain, because one, it's stressful, it kicks up your body's stress response, which overrules all hormones. So when you have this increased stress response, your body's survival mechanisms kick in, and that messes with your thyroid, it messes with your growth hormone, it messes with all your sex hormones. And it's not fair to call them sex hormones, because we need them for everything else, right? True. Muscle density and immune cells, our immune cells are relying on those hormones. But yeah, so pain and inflammation is stressful, and that blocks and disrupts hormones entirely. But it's also damaging in its own right, so that inflammation is like a chemical fire, and it just burns up and eats up our body from the inside out. So no matter where it came from, whether it was a knee or a back or something going on in the head or anywhere in the body, that gets in our blood and circulates through our body, and it's disrupting all of our hormones, and it's creating damage to anything it touches.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, even DHEA, people think, oh, it's just like I can buy DHEA over the counter. It's not a big hormone, but actually that is linked to pain, and it's linked to our immune system. So massively. And so let's talk about how someone can actually get their hormones tested. Imagine that patient comes in to see you. They've got bone on bone in their knees. They've got these discs that are just deteriorated and herniated, and they've got the set joint syndrome. Yeah. What would the process look like for them if they were to work with you?
Well, I mean, the first thing is we do a really good, and you and I are, this is something that we talk about a lot, is a lot of times if you just really sit down and you listen to a person, they're going to tell you the problem, and I know that's a Chinese medicine aspect, but really good doctors do that. They sit down and they listen. And we have these really highly trained case managers in both of our offices. And the first thing is you listen to what's going on, because that's going to help guide us on what kind of testing we really need to look at. And so the first thing is just sit down, make sure that, the person has a situation that we understand and that we could potentially help, and then really narrow it down, because they guide where it goes. And I know that's a novel idea, that the patient, what's going on with them actually guides the approach, but huge process, right? So then we look at where we want to test. And sometimes we look at things that might be surprising to know that it affects our hormones. Like, we'll look at, blood's a great example of really getting an idea of certain hormones, like your thyroid hormone and your growth hormone.
Yeah.
But our hormones, they're on this rhythm, and that's what we call that biological clock, or it's known as that circadian rhythm, right? And so knowing that rhythm, you want to get an idea of what a day looks like. And so a lot of times we may do salivary hormone testing, and that's an excellent way to look at your cortisol. You were talking about DHEA, to look at your testosterone and your progesterone. And estrogen is getting this, picture of the full day, and looking at salivary, because it tells us free fraction hormones, which means the available hormone, because hormones can be bound. For people watching and don't know it, hormones have to be carried through the body.
Right.
And when they're being carried, they can't be used. They have to be released. And salivary testing, or looking at the spit or the saliva, actually will tell us the free available hormones to our body. And that's a good number to know. And then one of the other things that we do is very commonly is actually get an analysis of the gut bacteria, because it massively impacts your hormones. Matter of fact, for estrogen, gram-negative bacteria, which is, I know we're kind of nerding out here, but this whole classification of bacteria, they actually activate that estrogen. And so you need to know if they're underactivating or overactivating. And they control how our hormones are received in our body, those proteins that carry our hormones, so and how we detoxify. So, to really accurately know what's going on, first you got to know what's going on with the person, and then you take that next step and get the necessary testing, whether it be saliva. You can actually use urine, you use blood, you can do stool. Those are all amazing ways to start to capture the real picture and the essence of what's going on with someone's hormones.
Man, well, I think for those of you on the summit, how many of you have actually looked into your hormones? I can guarantee you that I've never had a patient go to a pain specialist who said, hey, let's run your hormones before we establish a treatment protocol.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty novel idea, but think about what happens when your estrogen levels are low. You mentioned the gram-negative bacteria. That's what activates the estrogen. So you may have enough estrogen in your blood labs and it looks normal, but it's not active. And just like to your point, and so this is where you've got to dig a little deeper, because if you have low estrogen, think about what happens to your skin. It gets dehydrated, it gets wrinkly. The vaginal dryness for you menopausal women, I mean, this is a big thing. The joints, that little fluid and cushion in the joint starts to get dehydrated as well. So all these things are connected. And then what about bacteria in the joints?
Oh man, right? That's a whole other pathway, right? We get that, we call it translocation. And, I think some of the first things we ever saw translocation with were like COPD and emphysema.
Yeah.
If you get it in the gut, we'll find it in the lungs a lot. But, some of the more recent literature, the scientific data from the last few years is showing that nearly 100% of people that have arthritis have bacteria from their gut that has made its way into the joint, and it's done that through secretion. And it's not like in the synovial fluid the way you think would be there. It's actually being secreted from the blood through the bone and that epiphyseal plate, like secreted from the bone. So it's in the bone. That's scary to think about, that it's like in the joint via the bone from the blood where it got from the gut. That's crazy.
But a good way to realize how that works, I mean, think about a cavity.
Yeah.
The cavity is bacteria in a bone structure, which is the bones that we can see exposed, right? So 100%. It's basically like having cavities in your joint. And now the research is showing, oh, wow, virtually 100% of people who have osteoarthritis. We used to think rheumatoid arthritis was the only joint structure where there was a bacterial infection. Now we're seeing, okay, even in osteoarthritic joints. And so what are some things you can do, or what are some pieces of advice we could give the listeners so they could maybe eradicate some of that infection and get themselves out of pain?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we like to do, outside of the idea of actually knowing what kind of bacteria or pathogen we're up against, some of the first things that you can do is maintaining proper gut health, right?
Mm.
One of the worst things for your gut is not having enough digestive acids and enzymes. So taking digestive enzymes and some like betaine HCl, some type of something that improves the acid levels in our gut, because that maintains proper balance. And then also a probiotic, right? Probiotics are super important to keep that stuff under control. And then we have, depending on the joints and all the different areas of the body that these bacteria can get to, or how they can become disruptive, that's where we become a little bit more targeted in our approach with a botanical or an herbal blend that can actually identify that. But a really good liposomal turmeric is really good for those joints. It's immune modulatory, so it makes our immune system respond right. So, from just a bacterial standpoint, we're looking at how the gut influences it. Good digestive enzymes, and make sure the stomach acid's good. Taking a good probiotic and maybe some turmeric is always a good first step.
Yeah, love that. I mean, those things are so powerful. I can't understate the importance of getting the right nutrition in, because what I see is about 50% of your pain levels will come down just by changing that one little thing.
Yeah, and it's when we're talking about pain, there's a lot of studies on how pain is coming from the brain. Even after you've removed the actual insulting issue, the pain still remains. It's a chronic pain. And turmeric has been shown to actually alter that process in the brain, and then healing the gut. We know that has huge impacts on the brain. So when people are doing that, when people are doing something that simple, they are impacting their pain levels in multiple ways, probably more ways than we even understand fully. We just know that there's multiple mechanisms just beyond what we already know. So it's a very powerful move.
And turmeric is readily available. So you guys can go out and get turmeric. You can cook with it. You can order some curry. I mean, it's so good, really good for it. So this is fascinating. I mean, no one on the summit has addressed bacteria. No one has addressed the hormones. And I think these are really core components. And so let's talk about some of the case studies. Like, can you walk us through a patient who has had maybe knee pain or back pain, and they're super frustrated and didn't know what to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so many to choose from. It's really interesting. And I'll go real basic. So you take somebody, I just had a lady the other day, and, we can do bacteria. There's so many different things, but we had someone that had come in, and she's got full body pain, and she is mainly focused in like a knee and a shoulder and her low back. And she's done everything. She's done the chiropractic. She actually had some surgeries where they shave off that disc, the laminectomy, and she did some of the stem cell therapy. She actually did her own bone marrow.
Wow.
And nothing seems to be touching it. And so we said, well, let's step back and take the approach of, and a good question to ask is, well, does your body even have what it needs to even start to do its job?
Wow.
Because if you do medication, you do have surgery, or you do some type of, if you did bone marrow stem cell, or you did PRP, your body still has to have certain things to do its job. It's like, okay, just because you turn the electricity on to the factory, if the factory doesn't have the supplies for the product, doesn't mean it's going to work, right?
Good point. Yep.
So we asked that question. So we looked at hormones, and the hormones were incredibly disruptive. That thyroid hormone, and this is a critical piece for everybody. We know that the thyroid, and this may be new for a lot of people, is the thyroid has a regulatory function on every single cell in our body.
Yeah.
And when we say metabolism is activity, and everybody associates it with metabolism, but they never think about cellular activity. And that's what's actually doing the job. The cells are actually healing. And so if your thyroid's suboptimal, not only are you more prone to damage and injury, but you're not going to heal as well.
Right.
And so we found an issue there, right? And then she did have some digestive issues, just mild, just a little bit of gas and bloating. So, well, you're not supposed to have gas and bloating. It's not normal. So let's look in there. It's just common. So we look in there, and she was missing a whole classification of bacteria, which are needed for vitamin K to be active. And vitamin K is necessary for collagen. So how do you rebuild joints and ligaments and tendons, or how do you even heal them when you're missing a gut bacteria? And the crazy thing is, Reagan, her only symptom with her gut was she gets mild gas and bloating. That was it. Almost nothing. Yeah, that was it. No constipation. Yeah.
But her ability to activate vitamin K was missing. And how do you build bone without vitamin K?
Yeah.
How do you keep your blood thin enough to where it can get the nutrients where it needs to go without vitamin K? I mean, that's a critical component.
Yeah, massive. And then we also found that she had an inflammatory marker that was really high that's known to cause damage directly to nerves, and homocysteine. So we found that was elevated. She had a chronic, and this is really interesting, and this is something that I hope this is something that gets out, is she had chronic Epstein-Barr virus. And the research on Epstein-Barr virus is, a lot of doctors assume, okay, you had mono at one point, you're going to have, antibodies to it, but those antibodies are not supposed to be high. And there's a very specific one. It's an IgG antibody to the viral capsid antigen. So it's VCA, IgG to Epstein-Barr. And the research shows that the higher that is, the more it depletes people's neurotransmitters. So they have paresthesia, they'll get paralysis, they get myalgia, so they get all this muscle pain. They're more prone to arthritis. They're more prone to lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, neuropathies. So we found that as well. So here is a person that just came in and nothing was working. And we just said, well, let's look at, what may be going on and what may be missing, and years ago I heard Cade talk about, you guys said, hey, we basically remove what's not supposed to be there and replace it with what is. It's the same process, right? We find what needs to be removed. She's got this virus. She had this lack of bacteria. She had some major nutrient deficiencies, and her hormones were imbalanced. And that's why nothing that she tried, no matter how powerful it was, surgery wasn't successful, bone marrow stem cells wasn't successful, pain medication is very rarely successful, and she's just stuck. And it's not one single problem, is multiple issues. And that she's a really good example of, because you only need one of those things. You don't need all of them like she did. You just need one, and one is enough to make you have chronic pain, make your joints not heal, break down your nerves, chronic back pain, translocation of the bacteria like we talked about, and just overall lack of vitality. And really, she kind of had lost her desire for longevity, because she's like, well, what is living a long time going to do for me?
Right. I'm going to be on a couch because I'm in so much pain.
Yeah.
Non-functional. So you took her through the removal phase, the phase 1.
Right.
Phase 2, you started doing the reparative work, and then phase 3, the regenerative work. What did that look like, and what was her outcome?
Well, the first thing, she's a little bit newer, so we're just now into the remove and reduce the inflammation phase.
Okay.
So that's what we're doing right now. We're calming the fire, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do first. You always have to calm that fire and stop any more like further destruction and damage. But other patients, like we have another individual that very similar situation. And one thing I want to point out, and this will, you'll immediately, you got this, but with the people out there, if we had only addressed one of those problems, would she have actually gotten better?
Right. There's no way.
No. No. So it's a combination. You can't go into your health. It's the one thing you should never go into with blinders on.
Yeah.
Never go into your health with blinders. So, but one of our other patients, John, he came in with severe neuropathy, and he loves to talk about his case. He had amazing success with it, but same thing. He had, blood sugar disruption, really bad disruption in his gut bacteria. And, the first thing we identify it, we say, okay, now we have a targeted approach, because we could have 1,000 people come in, but between his biology and what his body needs is a very unique approach. So, we have our framework. We talk about the 5 pillars, and we share a very similar proprietary 3-step system, but each one of those steps has to be based on them. So with him, the first thing we did is we started bringing down that inflammation. And then we start working on that gut, right? Getting that gut healthy, because whatever he does, taking vitamins or supplements, he has to be able to absorb that, and he has to be able to get rid of that waste, right? And balance out those hormones. So it's really important that one of the early steps on in the process is to take care of that gut. Because we don't want the translocation. That's going to make our job even harder. And we want to make sure that we get rid of that toxicity and balance and regulate our immune system, which happens big clinical pearl here for people is your gut regulates the action of your immune system and make sure it properly is balanced. So we started there with him. And you know, what's interesting is we have him on a plan to go 7 months, and just 10 weeks in, getting this gut balanced and bringing down that inflammation, the reparative work starts to work on its own, because now his body has the right signaling from the hormones, the right resources to be able to build to actually start to do its job. So basically, we got his body out of the way of healing itself and take care of that recovery, right?
Yeah. Well, it's so powerful because I believe everyone comes factory installed with healing capabilities. Yeah. And as we age and we're exposed to more toxins and traumas in our life, you know, our ability to heal just gets shut down. And so when they come to a doctor like you, all you're doing is saying, well, let me get rid of this, let me get rid of that, and let's open up this pathway. And suddenly the body can heal, and really haven't done much except remove those barriers.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and sometimes they do need to go on and do other work, or they may need to go on and do a surgery, or need physical therapy, or still need their chiropractic or their acupuncture. And huge. Yeah, we're big on that. But first we say, okay, do you have what you need to do your job?
Right. Yeah.
Right? It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, this is fascinating. And I just want to touch on one more thing. If you've got a couple minutes, I know you've got a wall-to-wall day of patients, but if we look at infertility, do you see a certain percentage of your patients who come in with infertility issues who also struggle with joint pain or back pain?
Yeah, and there's a massive correlation there, right? Because with infertility, we usually see some major nutrient deficiencies. So you're going to get, if someone's not looking at all your essential nutrients, and I think there's upwards of near 48 essential nutrients, your body's going to break down, right? It's a known cause of inflammation. And so the same thing that disrupts those hormones causes systemic inflammation and damages the joints. But other piece of that is those hormones that are disrupted also have their own role. If it's thyroid, you know, everything's going to break down. It's more weak. If it's testosterone, the tensile strength for the ligaments and tendons and the muscles and the collagen proteins, it's just not in there. And testosterone's massive for our ability to repair. If it's estrogenic, it has huge impacts on our nerves and how they work, and also influences our immune cells. And then the hormones in general, they ride along the same proteins that heal our body, right? So those proteins are really, really key. And so if people's hormones are disrupted, they are way more prone to other injuries. They're more prone to inflammation. As a matter of fact, the number one cause that we see with infertility is inflammation.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the number one cause that we see in relationship to pain is inflammation.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
So that's wow. That's huge. So I think huge takeaways from this interview, and I think all of you, hopefully you've been taking notes. You're learning from the best of the best. Someone who can explain very complex things in simple ways. But this is huge, Dan. So the hormones, the bacteria in the gut, even looking at infertility, postmenopausal women, premenopausal women, you got to get these things corrected so your body can get out of pain. So Dan, this has been just incredible. I can't wait for your mitochondria summit you got coming up.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, Dan's hosting an entire event and doing the choreograph for the entire day. He's got the top-notch doctors coming on stage. So thanks for all the work that you do. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you and to visit you at your clinic?
Yeah, absolutely. So if people go to peakvitalitydenver.com, That's our website, and you can immediately message us through Facebook app on there, or you can call our office at 720-504-8007. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sit down, get to know you, find out what you're dealing with, what your goals are, and figure out what the next best step is going to be.
Yeah, and I can tell you, Dan's the best of the best to work with. He's my doctor. When I get my labs ran, I send it to Dan. I don't even try to interpret them myself. So you'll be working with the best. So get in touch with him. Thanks so much, Dr. Kellams. Always a pleasure, and I always learn something new every time we talk.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. Very grateful.